Latin America, a region already suffering from strife and protest. Once rich nations that have been brought to their knees are now facing a global pandemic. Ecuador is one of the worst affected countries.
Los 5 contenedores que tenemos es para una capacidad de 50 cadáveres cada uno.
Some leaders are denying there's a threat.
Algumas poucas autoridades, estaduais e municipais, devem abandonar o conceito de terra arrasada.
While other nations are leading the fight.
Pero la precaución y el entrenamiento nos hace sentirnos seguros.
But in Latin America, the worst of COVID-19 may be yet to come. One of the world's most vibrant cities is for now quiet and subdued. The Copacabana beach in Rio de Janeiro is deserted. The hotels are closed and the tourists have gone home. This is Brazil under the coronavirus pandemic. The virus that not long ago the Brazilian president called a media fantasy, while also talking of hysteria. As other countries were starting to lock down, Brazil's leader was happy to be among supporters, shaking hands at a rally.
Não tem preço o que esse povo aqui está fazendo no dia de hoje, apesar de eu ter sugerido, né? Não posso mandar, a manifestação não é minha. O adiamento dado a esse vírus que, se eu falar que está superdimensionado aqui, vai dar manchete.
And he does have his supporters.
Corrupção mata muito mais que esse vírus hoje.
I think the media is hyping up the coronavirus. More people die actually from the flu.
Jair Bolsonaro also thinks he may be at less risk than others.
No meu caso particular, pelo meu histórico de atleta, caso fosse contaminado pelo vírus, não precisaria me preocupar. Nada sentiria ou seria, quando muito, acometido de uma gripezinha ou resfriadinho.
The wrong information at the wrong time. He posted messages on both Facebook and Twitter that were both deleted by the social media companies. One endorsing an as-yet untested drug as a pandemic cure, and another calling for an end to social distancing. As state governors and mayors took the lead in closing public venues and telling people to stay home. Brazilians went to their windows and balconies to take part in protests against the president. Pots and pans were banged across towns and cities in reaction to Bolsonaro's criticism of the local coronavirus response.
Algumas poucas autoridades, estaduais e municipais, devem abandonar o conceito de terra arrasada.
It's the class divide in countries like Brazil that may yet prove devastating. 14 million people live in the favelas, the slum areas, where basic sanitation is lacking and people are struggling with lost income.
Todo mundo, cada dentro das suas casas. Quando alguém sabe comprar alguma coisa, comprar e sair por necessidade.
In this favela in Sao Paulo, mistrust of the government is high. Residents have formed their own medical teams.
O trabalho que a gente está fazendo para Paraisópolis é um cenário de guerra. Se o Brasil hoje se encontra em guerra, as favelas se encontram em guerra 2, 3 vezes a mais. A gente, quando fala de saúde pública e quando se fala da saúde pública na favela, é pior ainda. Então quem estava desassistido agora então está mais ainda.
There's also great concern for Brazil's indigenous population, numbering around 850,000 people. They are worried, for good reason. Theirs is a grim history of imported diseases wiping out their people in large numbers, be it malaria, measles, or even influenza in the 1970s.
não é morrer de coronavírus aqui não, no país não, a gente teme é morrer de fome, dentro das nossas comunidades preso, né? Enquanto a FUNAI e a CESAI, que são os órgãos que cuidam da nossa saúde e do nosso direito legal, né, nas instâncias de justiça, viraram as costas pra gente.
They're asking officials to expel outsiders from their lands, people who could infect them, as they've done before. Bolsonaro hasn't been the only Latin American leader who hasn't seemed to take the pandemic seriously. Andrés Manuel López Obrador, president of Mexico, made a point of publicly walking the streets, tweeting selfies and kissing babies.
No nos van a hacer nada. Los infortunios, las pandemias.
His advice was that people should relax and read Gabriel Garcia Marquez's novel Love in the Time of Cholera. The attitudes of the Mexican and Brazilian leaders are a stark contrast to El Salvador's. Flights were banned from China at the end of January, and then from South Korea and Italy. An initiative taken by Nayib Bukele, the president, weeks before his country's first confirmed case of COVID-19.
Se aplica una cuarentena para todo el territorio nacional, pero siempre se van a permitir las importaciones y las exportaciones. Esto para tratar de mantener un equilibrio económico y que la crisis económica no venga a cobrar más vidas que la crisis sanitaria.
It's the countries with weak economies and unstable political systems that are likely to be hit the hardest. Venezuela is already suffering from long-term unrest. Hyperinflation, recession, rock-bottom oil revenues, and a leader in Nicolas Maduro who has presided over high levels of hunger and a weakened health system. The pressure on the Venezuelan leadership was cranked up by the United States, indicting Maduro and more than a dozen other officials on charges of narco-terrorism and provoking a furious reaction.
Así se lo digo a Donald Trump. Eres un miserable, Donald Trump. Él actúa como no solo como un cowboy, racista, supremacista, no solo como eso. Él maneja las relaciones internacionales como un extorsionador de las mafias neoyorquinas que él dirigió como jefe de la empresa inmobiliaria.
The US also offered to drop its existing economic sanctions if Maduro stepped aside and elections followed. It may be the least of their worries in Venezuela. Their health system has been degraded to an alarming degree. There's a lack of facilities, supplies and doctors, while the fuel situation is so bad, doctors and nurses have had to queue for hours to buy petrol.
Pero si no estamos haciendo guardia, estamos trasnochándonos para venir a hacer estas colas y probando suerte a ver si logramos echar gasolina o no, para seguir yendo a las guardias, a seguir atendiendo a la gente, bueno, en la situación que estamos.
The country is relying on help from outside. Tons of emergency medical supplies have been arriving from China. And Cuba has been sending doctors and nurses, not just to Venezuela. This group of medical staff left for Lombardy, at the time the worst affected region in Italy.
La medicina cubana tiene un valor y independientemente de que en algún momento se le dé la espalda, se reconoce y eso es muy importante.
Pero la precaución y el entrenamiento nos hace sentirnos seguros.
Cuba has also shipped teams to Suriname, Nicaragua, Jamaica and Grenada. It's something the United States has criticized. It says the Cuban doctors are putting themselves in harm's way for very little money.
¿Qué esclavos salvan vidas en el mundo? ¿Qué persona trata con personas que van espontánea y voluntariamente a cumplir misión? Quiero decirle que más de 12,000 personas estuvieron dispuestas a ir al ébola y ahora, en estos momentos, hay miles de cubanos dispuestos a cumplir esta misión.
There remains a fear of the effect the virus might have on already weakened economies. Analysts predict Mexico and Venezuela will see their economies contract the most. Now the European Union says it's going to provide more than $20 billion for countries in Latin America as well as Asia and Africa. Politically, the pandemic may help some governments. Elections in Bolivia have been postponed, while the Congress in Chile has postponed a constitutional referendum, one that had been a key concession to those calling for political change. The pandemic has also allowed the Chile government to ban public gatherings, including the mass demonstrations that had been seen on the streets since October. While many parts of the world are hoping for an end to lockdowns and quarantines, as well as possible containment of the pandemic, winter is coming to the Southern Hemisphere and parts of Latin America. As yet it's unknown, but colder temperatures could yet exacerbate the COVID-19 contagion across the region.